National Collegiate Athletic Association recently conducted a study with 37,000 student athletes and found that over a third reported having trouble sleeping, more than a quarter reported feeling sad, and 1 in 10 reported feeling so depressed they found it hard to function properly each and every day. Another survey conducted by Victoria Garrick, former USC Division I volleyball player and mental health athlete, found that 69 out of 100 student athletes had experienced symptoms of depression within the last 5 months, and more than half reported feeling depression, anxiety, or an eating disorder, but were too afraid to tell anyone. George Orwell, English novelist, essayist, and critic, even went as far as to say that sports are war without the shooting. This begs the question, how are competitive sports affecting the mental health of teen athletes? While sports may provide benefits to the growth and development of young teens, they inflict harm just as well. Mental health can be easily overlooked when it comes to sports. Those suffering from mental health issues cannot receive the help they need unless they seek it, which becomes hard with social stigma. My name is Carley Weber, and I found that competitive sports harm the mental health of teen athletes emotionally and socially, negatively shaping their character. The time and commitment involved with sports participation can cause tremendous amounts of stress. Rebecca Liberal, Andres Lopez de la Llave, Maria C. Perez-Yantada, and Alexandre Garcia-Mas, authors of Psychological Impact of Sports Injuries and Psychological Well-Being in Relation to Sports Performance in Competitive Gymnastics, dive deeper into this notion, investigating the psychological profile of athletes. They determined student athletes mentally prepare themselves before competition. Garrick agreed with this, saying, quote, "Mental illness is associated with weakness. To appear weak is the last thing an athlete wants." Instead of seeking help, teen athletes will push their feelings inside, trying not to seem vulnerable. Garrick adds on to this, saying her own schedule left her tired and drained. Additionally, Anditi Mankad, Sandy Gorman, and Karen Wallman, authors of Psychoimmunological Effects of Written Emotional Disclosure During Long-Term Injury Rehabilitation, conducted a study looking at injured athletes. They noted teens experience symptoms such as grief, loss, and traumatic stress lasting up to 6 months at least. A poor psychological state pressured by injury not only harms the emotions of teen athletes, it can hurt their performance. Mankad, Gordon, and Wallman explain how poor psychological recovery can cause athletes to, quote, mentally hinder performance to the point where they become more susceptible to injury, end quote. This leads teen athletes to more stress, which leads to low self-esteem, which creates an unstable mind, causing an athlete to push themselves too far. Over time, sports can create a broken, unstable mindset for many young teens because of sports injury. Mankad, Gordon, and Wallman found that recovering athletes experience, quote, considerable emotional trauma throughout demanding rehabilitation, end quote. Emotional trauma from an injury can build up, creating a negative mindset that can follow an athlete as they continue their sport. This can deplete their confidence and change their perception on what they think they know about their sport. This can happen from a head injury. An article from Gale in Context Online Collection states that almost 446,788 head injuries resulted in hospitalization in 2009. These injuries can not only be life-threatening, they can hurt an athlete's future. Certain head injuries can cause loss of consciousness or even death. While physically deadly, these injuries also have psychological effects. Liberal, Lopez de la Llave, Perez-Yantada, and Garcia-Mas note that the perception of the injury in the eyes of the athlete can affect their general well-being. Injuries can create lapses in performance and hinder a player's abilities. Now unable to participate, they will become more depressed from deprivation and frustrated with themselves because of their injury. This can lead to many mental health issues. Sports are an emotional toll on teens, but they can also twist their actions and affect their social response to others. An article by the Associated Press recorded a number of sports incidents claiming that, quote, violence is a part of the game in many sports, end quote. The number of incidents in sports isn't dwindling, especially in competition. Fights are being caused by two things, the mental twist encouraged for play and the sports fans. Johannes Brenn and Sebastian Uhrich, authors of Enemies with Benefits, the dual role of rivalry in shaping sports fans' identity, combat this, stating that, quote, rivalry can be described as a double-edged sword, end quote. So fan bases can become toxic easily. With fans shouting negative comments concerning gameplay, teen athletes may become more overwhelmed and question their work ethic. With this chaos, some teams may lash out against opposing players. Sports have become nothing if not competitive. According to Orwell, as soon as a player feels they'll experience some sort of shame or disgrace if they lose, quote, the most savage combative instincts are aroused, end quote. He suggests that more pressure on an athlete causes them to become more unstable. This creates a harsh, false image of themselves, creating a persona representing a strong athlete. Orwell addresses the fans of sports as well, recalling a moment where he witnessed savage fans at a game. He said the fans broke through police lines just to stop the goalkeeper at a critical moment in the game. Fans are not only overinvested, they're also disruptive. Orwell shows this brutality arising in sports from fan impulse. This negativity travels fast to players, who then begin to harm each other under pressure and influence. Orwell stated there's already a plethora of problems in sports, and that, quote, we need not add to them by encouraging young men to kick one another on the shins amid the roars of infuriated spectators. Violence in sports has terrible repercussions, and it needs to be stopped. However, some people think that sports are beneficial for physical and mental health. Elisa Garcia-Flagueras, doctor in neuroscience and researcher for psychiatric disorders, agrees with this notion, stating that sports relieve endorphins, creating lower stress levels. This can create healthier mindset and allow an athlete to do what they love casually. Garcia-Flagueras also notes that sports may allow a, quote, reduction of depressive symptoms, end quote, in young athletes. With so many teens battling depression, allowing them to de-stress is a huge advancement. According to Niall Skye Coella and Jennifer Sunrise Winter, authors of Taking College Esports Seriously, sports allow for team building skills. An esports player stated, quote, it's like you have to see these guys for the next 30 weeks. You're living with these people, end quote. This idea of closely knit teams creates the illusion that sports promote teamwork and that teams can build each other up and work together. Yet, sports are not always pleasant. While they produce some benefits, sports can destroy the mental health of students by creating stressful schedules to keep up with, as well as pressuring student athletes with expectations. Orwell believed that, quote, there are quite enough real causes of trouble already, end quote, and that sports should not add to this chaos. Sports can harm athletes physically, changing the way they see themselves and perhaps the way they see their sport. While they may have their benefits, it is difficult to see sports through the chaos of competition. Competitive sports negatively affect social and mental health of student athletes both internally and socially, creating irreversible damage on teens. According to Garrick, mental health issues are ignored and hardened by social stigma. To solve this, Robin Kuick and Suzanne Potts, authors of Mental Health in Athletes, suggest talking to such individuals or doing relaxing activities can help take the strain out of sports. While this solution is beneficial for teen mental health, it has its limitations. Among these athletes, about 30% will actually seek help. This keeps many teens in the dark, feeling alone and isolated with their problems. Another solution would be to collect quantitative data on the issue. However, data is limited and suffers from underfunding. Data will bring much needed change to sports. Without it, competition will continue to rage like war. Over time, it won't just be like war, competition will become war, and the negative effects coming with it will forever play out in our future. Nevertheless, with this solution implemented, teen athletes will be able to get the help they need and live better, happier lives. With acknowledgement from others, perhaps teen athletes may get the help they need, and the nature of competitive sports can finally change for the better. Thank you.
Okay, Carley, thank you. So the first of two questions. The first one, if you had more time, what additional research would you conduct related to your issue?
If I had more time, I would have tried to dive in and find a lot more facts. Like, the only facts that I really used was, the only database that I got facts was the National Collegiate Athletic Association, which was an article of a bunch of different facts relating to sports and teen mental health. And then some other facts I found, studies conducted by Victoria Garrick that she talked about in her TED Talk, and also the Galen Context Online Collection, that source talking about head injuries, I found that in there. But other than those, I didn't really look for much factual data as much as just voices of academic scholars. So if I could go back and try to research more, I would probably look for facts.
Thank you. The second question then, can you explain the level of certainty you have about your conclusion, your solutions, or your recommendations there at the end?
I feel fairly confident about both solutions. I think they both can work really well. The first one, allowing teens to just relax, do what they love casually, and talk to each other. I think that's a really good solution because it lets them go out and actually choose to get help. But the only problem with it is that they don't really do it, which ties into, I think, my second solution, which is quantitative data should be done. And as I said, answering the first question, I didn't look for much data because sometimes there isn't a lot of data on specific things that you're looking for. So putting more data in, for people to go and look at and see can potentially solve the limitations to an extent of the first solution, because it can make those teen athletes think, oh, more people than just me are actually struggling with this, maybe I can go now and get help. So it kind of ties into what Robin Kuick and Suzanne Potts were saying when they were saying letting these teen athletes go do what they love casually and talk to other people and get help and de-stress. It kind of, the second solution of getting more data kind of ties into that, fixing those solutions, which I think makes it a stronger conclusion overall. But I think both of those are really good solutions.
Thank you very much.